How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Hello, America. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, delighted to have you. Let's talk about Jimmy Kimmel, shall we? I'm happy to let you chime in on this, but I got the receipts to make some points on this. Let's begin with what Jimmy Kimmel actually said, that he hasn't been fired, he's been suspended indefinitely. And that difference does matter because essentially Jimmy Kimmel could come back on the air. So not fired, Kimmel, just suspended indefinitely. This is what got him suspended by ABC News, this monologue.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty.
Yes. He's at the fourth stage of grief, construction.
It was the beginning of that. Jimmy Kimmel propagating the left-wing lie that Charlie Kirk's assassin was MAGA. What's so notable today are how a lot of people on the left are actually trying to gaslight us and say that's not actually what he said. That's not actually what he meant. Now, I want to play for you this again.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing...
Trying to characterize this kid who killed Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them. And so Brendan Carr, the FCC chairman, went on Benny Johnson's podcast and said this.
I mean, obviously, look, there's calls for Kimmel to be fired. I think, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at. And again, we may ultimately be called to be a judge on that. But yes, this also strikes me as sort of conduct that to some extent shows some sort of desperate irrelevance. I mean, we're sort of exiting an era where the three main legacy broadcast networks could control and dictate the narrative to the American people. And one of the things that President Trump did when he ran for office, he ran directly at that legacy media establishment. And he smashed the facade that they get to control what we say, what we think, the narrative around events. And
he says that the FCC may get involved. ABC could do this the hard way or the easy way. Notice he didn't say Jimmy Kimmel should be fired. He mentioned suspension. He didn't say fired. And the left, of course, is upset. Here's the problem. I have the receipts for you. This is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a member of the United States Congress when the Democrats controlled things.
I do think that several members of Congress in some of my discussions have brought up media literacy because that is a part of what happened here. And we're going to have to figure out how we rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation. It's one thing to have differing opinions, but it's another thing entirely to just say things that are false. And so that's something that we're looking into.
That was her. And here is Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader.
These lies continue tonight. Rupert Murdoch, who has admitted they were lies and said he regretted it, has a special obligation to stop Tucker Carlson from going on tonight now that he's seen how he has perverted and slimed the truth, and from letting him go on again and again and again. Not because their views deserve such opprobrium, but because our democracy depends on it.
Our democracy depends on it. And Chuck Schumer himself wrote a letter to Rupert Murdoch. As you noted in your deposition, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, and other Fox personalities knowingly, repeatedly, and dangerously endorsed and promoted the big lie that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. Though you have acknowledged your regret in allowing this grave propaganda to take place, your network continue to promote, spew, and perpetuate election conspiracy theories to this day. We demand that you direct Tucker Carlson and other hosts on your network to stop spreading false information. And it went on from there. And it was multiple Democratic members of Congress calling on Fox to clean up its airwaves or else. Now, I'm old-fashioned here. I don't think the government should be dictating what networks air or don't air. I don't think Brendan Carr should be using the power of the FCC to threaten ABC over Jimmy Kimmel. I actually think he's the boogeyman here, because what really happened is Nexstar, which owns 37 ABC affiliates, and Sinclair, which owns, I think, about 100. They own more ABC affiliates than any other station group, said they're pulling Jimmy Kimmel. In fact, Sinclair Broadcasting came out very firmly and said it's not enough what they did. Here's their statement. As discussed with ABC earlier today, Sinclair decided to indefinitely preempt Jimmy Kimmel Live beginning tonight. Mr. Kimmel's remarks were inappropriate and deeply insensitive at a critical moment for our country, said Vice Chairman Jason Smith. We believe broadcasters have a responsibility to educate and elevate respectful, constructive dialogue in our communities. We appreciate FCC Chairman Carr's remarks today, and this incident highlights the critical need for the FCC to take immediate regulatory action to address control held over local broadcasters by the big networks. Sinclair's ABC stations will air a special in remembrance of Charlie Kirk this Friday. Sinclair will not lift the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel Live on our stations until formal discussions are held with ABC regarding the network's commitment to professionalism and accountability. Sinclair calls upon Mr. Kimmel to issue a direct apology to the Kirk family. Furthermore, Sinclair asked Mr. Kimmel to make a meaningful donation to the Kirk family and Turning Point USA. Regardless of ABC's plans for the future of the station, Sinclair intends not to return Jimmy Kimmel Live to our air until we're confident that appropriate steps have been taken. You can say Brendan Carr is the boogeyman all you want, that he's the guy who did this, but let's be clear. This looks, in fact, I was talking to a buddy of mine who used to work for Bob Iger, and he said, this looks staged to me, that they waited for Brendan Carr to come out to say something so that Nexstar and Sinclair could say, yeah, we're out, we're done, giving them greater pretext so they're not dragged into a lawsuit with ABC over suspending Kimmel, that they could force ABC's hand. And let's be real clear here. What Jimmy Kimmel has done, his ratings are not good. And what Jimmy Kimmel has done is he's taken late night TV, where a lot of Americans used to go to after the news as they wound down, and they watched and they laughed together. And he, like Stephen Colbert, very specifically targeted a very progressive audience. Jimmy Kimmel would not have on Republicans. Jimmy Kimmel would make jokes about Republicans. He would not make jokes about Democrats. Instead, he would have them on air to affirm their worldview. Jimmy Kimmel alienated half the nation with a broadcast news outlet. I am in broadcast radio. I don't like the fact that the FCC might want to crack down on something I say. There are certain words I can't say on broadcast. And also, I have a commitment to truth under federal regulation. If there's a massive crime or sensational news story, there are regulations that say I cannot lie about that if that lie would knowingly cause harm. Jimmy Kimmel went on television on Monday not coincidentally, the left was trying to seed a narrative to the population that Charlie Kirk was assassinated by someone on the right, and Jimmy Kimmel says just that. And what the left is doing now is saying, no, that's not actually what he said, and also free speech, free speech. The left was perfectly fine when the same network, ABC, fired Roseanne, which had its highest rated show because she made an offensive joke on Twitter. They fired her and the left applauded at the time. But Jimmy Kimmel affirms the left's views. Here's the problem. I don't think the FCC should get involved, but the left does. What the left doesn't like is conservatives, the Trump administration, the right, playing by the left's rules. Either everybody's got to say this is wrong and can't happen again, or it's going to keep happening. There is an escalation happening, but you're lying to yourself and to others if you think the right started this. Remember, it was Barack Obama who had a YouTuber arrested and blamed for the escalation in Benghazi. It was Barack Obama who did that, targeted a YouTuber. It was the left that harassed a guy in New York for putting up a doctored video of Nancy Pelosi looking like she was slurring her words. They actually targeted that guy, tried to get his job. It is the left that pioneered cancel culture, and then when the right complains, the cancel culture is not a real thing. People have to have consequences for their actions. This is consequences for their actions. Well, guess what? This is consequences for Jimmy Kimmel's actions. No, I don't like Jimmy Kimmel being suspended for what he said. But you know what? Jimmy Kimmel also decided to alienate half the country, and Nexstar and Sinclair had enough. They weren't able to sell ads during their show. You know, what happens is the networks provide content to the local markets, and the local markets sell advertising. In exchange for that, there's a payment of some money. But then they get to sell local advertising. Nexstar and Sinclair in more than half the country couldn't sell local advertising during Jimmy Kimmel because he had alienated their audience. Let me just read you. This is just Nexstar. I didn't even get into Sinclair. Dothan, Alabama. Panama City, Florida. Augusta, Georgia. Rockford, Illinois. Evansville, Indiana. Terre Haute, Indiana. Sioux City, Iowa. Topeka, Kansas. New Orleans, Louisiana. Grand Rapids, Michigan. Joplin, Missouri, Billings, Montana, Watertown, New York, Youngstown, Ohio, Erie, Pennsylvania, Knoxville, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, the Tri-Cities area of Tennessee and Virginia, Lubbock, Texas, Midland, Texas, Salt Lake City, Wheeling, West Virginia, Clarksburg, West Virginia. Now, there are a few others in there in New York, and there's Richmond, Virginia, and a few others. But these are not exactly progressive areas of the country for most of Nexstar. They couldn't sell advertising to those markets because of Kimmel. And they had repeatedly complained that Kimmel had alienated their audience in their markets. And ABC did nothing. Kimmel has increasingly gotten progressive and partisan. And they finally had enough. On Instagram last week, here's what Jimmy Kimmel said. Instead of the angry finger pointing, can we just have, for one day, agree that it's a horrible and monstrous thing to shoot another human? Apparently, he literally was literal in that. Can we just for one day agree? Because on Monday, he said we hit some new lows over the weekend when the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them. I don't really have much sympathy for Jimmy Kimmel being suspended. I don't think the FCC should have gotten involved. It would have been a lot cleaner had they not gotten involved, because now the left can say, oh, power, power, power. It's the left. But you know what? Here's what's happening. And I want you to pay attention to this, because this is the most important point here. There's not a single person on the left calling to defang the FCC. Not a single person on the left is right now saying the FCC should not have this power. Not a single person on the left is saying we need to reform the FCC or get rid of the FCC. Not a single person on the left is taking that position. They want the power to do what Brendan Carr did. They want the power to bully networks they don't like. I played you the receipts. AOC, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries in a letter. They want the power. They just don't want it used against them. And they resent like hell that the right said, we're defenders of free speech. We don't like this stuff. And now the right's like, well, if they're going to do it, we're going to do it. You're not going to get unilateral disarmament by the right. So either you've got to disarm and work with the right to gut the FCC, or don't expect the right to sit on the sidelines. You want to talk about escalation and who started it? Barack Obama, for God's sakes, he arrested a YouTuber over Benghazi. So you'll forgive me for not liking what happened, but also not caring about what happened and thinking Jimmy Kimmel brought this on himself, because he did bring this on himself. And I'm struggling to really care that they took him off the air because, he did bring it on himself. Howdy. So I was chatting with a buddy of mine earlier, and it was kind of funny because I saw another talk radio show host talk about this yesterday, and I had made a note to talk about it. Now I know some people this has happened to as well, and there are some divisive people on the right who want to weave politics into theology deeply. And it's kind of alarming. I've now seen a number of pastors come under attack because on Sunday they didn't do sermons about Charlie Kirk. It's the gospel of Jesus Christ, not the gospel of Charlie Kirk. And I actually believe in expositional preaching, where a church works through a book of the Bible and you learn the book of the Bible. That's what my church does. And my church was working through Matthew, and I would have been appalled if I got to church on Sunday and my pastor decided instead to preach a completely different sermon about the assassination of Charlie Kirk as opposed to continue to work through Matthew. I don't think I need to see or hear talk radio from the pulpit. And I'm not surprised there are some divisive people on the right who are trying to divide the church. The Bible warns about in the end times. There will be the vipers and people who want their ears tickled. I want you to find a church that takes the Bible seriously, believes it's the inerrant word of God. And if you're upset that your pastor did not preach about Charlie Kirk on Sunday, that to me suggests that you have taken your religion and turned it into a political idol. If your pastor did preach on Charlie Kirk, totally fine. But if you go to a good Bible-believing church and you're suddenly deciding your pastor's woke because he didn't preach about Charlie Kirk, that's actually your political ideology spilling into your theology instead of the other way around, and that's your sin, not your pastor's sin, and you should deal with it, not him. Now, let me tell you about Vision Computer. 404-COMPUTE. You can go to 404-COMPUTE. Call them at 404-COMPUTE anywhere nationwide. Tell them Eric sent you, and they can build you a computer. They can upgrade your computer. They can be your managed IT service. They can take care of your computers. They can even remote in. And unlike a lot of managed IT services, instead of getting an IT ticket email system, you actually get a phone number. You call them and an actual human being answers the phone in 15 seconds or less. It's a great, great way for you to work with Vision, and they can keep you going, keep you online, keep you productive. 404-COMPUTER, visioncomputers.com. Tell them Eric sent you. You might be able to save even more money. 404-COMPUTE, and they work with businesses in all 50 states too, not just in the Southeast, but everywhere. They're fantastic. I've got a computer from them in my house. I know how awesome their tech support is. See it for yourself. Call them at 404-COMPUTE today or go to visioncomputers.com. Build a relationship with Vision Computers for your next computer purchase or your managed IT for you, your home, your office. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, let's go to Jim, waiting patiently. Welcome, sir. How are you?
Fine. Well, I think we've just found the left equivalent of a martyr in Jimmy Kimmel. If he gets taken off temporarily, they'll come back and say, well, MAGA tried to take us out, but we speak truth to power, and we're still here. But if he gets taken off permanently, then they've got their martyr that they will probably say is bad, if not worse, than the murder of Charlie Kirk. They're trying to murder truth. If I were a bet man, I would put money on that.
Oh, look, they're already going for the right is trying to silence. The right is anti-truth and on and on and on. They're I did not realize that in this news story about Charlie Kirk's assassination, the real victim of the assassination is Jimmy Kimmel. But that's where we're headed with the left right now. The way they're pursuing these stories is that they're the victims, not Charlie Kirk. I really do feel compelled to spend some more time on this because what I find is that When you bring up examples of the left doing things during the Obama administration or the Biden administration, what you find is that a lot of progressives either they were not aware of them or they supported them. And I think it's worth noting that, yeah, you may have forgotten it, but Barack Obama decided to arrest a YouTuber for inflaming tensions that led to Benghazi. Barack Obama and Joe Biden were perfectly happy to censor people on the right. It was Barack Obama, you will recall, who sued nuns to get them to try to forcibly pay for abortions. Nuns, they sued nuns. When Joe Biden was running for president, the left was very happy. The New York Post was shut down on its social media feed and Twitter because of its accurate reporting on Hunter Biden. Everyone on the left said it was perfectly fine and said this isn't censorship. It's not the government doing it. And then when they got into power, it is very important to recall, we actually have a Supreme Court case on this, where the Biden administration applied pressure to social media groups to censor anyone who said anything they decided was disinformation or misinformation about COVID. We've had entire lectures by the left on disinformation and misinformation and how it wasn't protected by free speech. We've had efforts by the Biden administration working through third-party groups to target the advertisers of conservative websites. And it was the Biden administration working with outside progressive groups targeting advertisers to conservative websites and news sites. We've had progressive groups with the blessing of Democrats in power launch advertiser boycotts against people on the right. Let's not forget the pressure that was brought to bear by the left and by the Obama administration when Rush Limbaugh was on the air with his statements on Sandra Fluck, where they wanted to leverage the power of the FCC to go after Rush Limbaugh. They're upset with the FCC going after Jimmy Kimmel. They were okay with it going after Rush Limbaugh. The left is fine using the power. They just don't like it used against them. And that, honestly, is the problem. The left is totally fine with what's happening. They just don't like it against them. You will recall that Mark Zuckerberg admitted the Biden administration pressured Facebook to censor COVID content. And the Biden administration pressured Twitter to censor what they viewed as COVID disinformation. You will recall that Jimmy Kimmel and the left cheered on Roseanne Barr getting fired by ABC for her Twitter joke. You will recall Disney ousting Gina Carano from the Mandalorian series because of her political statements online. You will recall how the left targeted a 9-year-old Kansas City Chiefs fan saying he wore blackface at a Kansas City Chiefs game and showed half his face in black and didn't show the other side of his face that was in red, the Kansas City Chiefs colors. You will recall how the media vilified a young man in Washington, D.C. who was approached by a progressive activist in Native American gear, claiming that the young man at the March for Life harassed the guy. They maligned the kid and were all sued. And he won. My buddy Sean Trinity at Real Clear Politics, he put this tweet up. 2 concepts that explain 95% of what you see on the right today. 1, Ace of Spades, I think, had an old quote to the effect of, I can play by the old rules. I like the old rules. What I won't do is play by the old rules when you play by the new rules. I had hoped for a de-escalation, but that's not the road we're headed down. 2, some things like Kimmel are escalations from things like Biden folks jawboning social media companies to take down content, or the State Department spending $250 million on anti-disinformation, non-governmental organizations. It still blows my mind that a good number of my liberal friends not only defend it, but had zero problem with it. So Trump escalates some things further, and the attitude is, we don't think the line between acceptable escalation and unacceptable escalation is magically drawn by whether Biden or Trump did it. It's a radical cycle of illiberalism. It is bad. I'm not sure how to find a way out of it. There is no way out unless the left decides to de-escalate. Because the right, you saw the entirety of the right, from Steve Bannon to Ted Cruz to me, condemn Pam Bondi for her statements suggesting hate speech was not protected by the Constitution. You had the entirety of the right-wing movement from one end to the other criticizing Pam Bondi for her statements on free speech and hate speech. None of us like the idea of Brendan Carr suggesting some sort of punishment or threat to ABC if it didn't suspend Jimmy Kimmel. And I would note again, he did not say fire. In fact, declined to say fire Jimmy Kimmel. None of us want that. But there are a lot of people on the right who aren't going to sit on their hands and say, I'm playing differently than you guys with this. I say all the time, our ways are not their ways. We can behave differently, and I think we should, but that's not where we are with most people on the right who look at the left saying every time they get in power, they use the power of government to try to censor, try to silence people on the right. We're going to play by their rules and give them a taste of their medicine. And for all the hand-wringing on the left saying, we don't do this, you do. You just deny it, you lie about it, or you're not aware of it happening. You people literally sued nuns to try to force them to pay for abortions. You don't have any moral high ground here. If you don't want this to happen, you stop it. But when you guys are in power, you have people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez say we got to rein in misinformation and disinformation. And you know what the misinformation and the disinformation is? It's stuff they don't like. They claimed the Hunter Biden laptop story was disinformation from Russia, and it was true. Many of the things said about COVID turned out to be true, and it has inspired an entire generation of conspiracy theorists because much of what was said about COVID from the right turned out to be true, but it was the Biden administration trying to get those people censored so they couldn't say it online, and the social media companies willingly complying. We had massive blowback from the right against Pam Bondi. I can assure you from that, people on the right don't think hate speech should be prosecuted. But there is one other aspect of this as well. The left believes people on the right don't matter. And so you can get in a position at ABC, which is a broadcast network that caters to every American, and you can get on a late night show and decide, you know what, those people are going to solely be the butt of the joke because they don't matter. And at some point, market forces do begin to intervene. Market forces intervened with Stephen Colbert. It was too expensive to keep the show going. In fact, this is one of those left-wing conspiracies. The left is convinced that they shut down Stephen Colbert because of Donald Trump, except they're giving him until the end of March. And they made clear, even the progressives within the company, familiar with the decision, that it had nothing to do with Trump and everything to do with revenue. Because his ratings were down, they weren't making money, and the left refuses to believe the truth. The left wants to believe bad things. The left always wants to be a victim. The reality is the victim was Charlie Kirk. He was assassinated last week. And ever since, people on the left have been denying a progressive did it. Jimmy Kimmel played into that on Monday night. Heather Cox Richardson with her Substack, CNN, MSNBC, they've all refused. Caitlin Collins, we had the DA give a pronouncement of the motive, is that the guy was a progressive who had embraced transgenderism and thought Charlie Kirk spread hate. And Caitlin Collins on CNN is like, I don't know what the motive is. They haven't said what the motive is. I'm sorry, Caitlin Collins, that the district attorney did not pull out a trumpet away and announce, I will now state the motive. And yet what's so amazing is that the left, so scared of the power of government, doesn't want to rein in the government. They don't actually want to de-escalate. They just don't like that power being used against them. They don't like what they do to the right being done to them. I would gladly support them if they offered legislation or even regulation to roll back the powers of the FCC to do anything related to content. I'd gladly support it. I think the federal government has too much power. And I honestly think the way to neutralize the left is not to play their games, but to get rid of the power they use. Because I will tell you what's going to happen. There's going to be another escalation. When the left gets elected next, you will see them targeting Fox News. You will see them targeting any network that aired conservative voices. You will see them targeting social media companies that amplified conservatives. You will see them doing everything that the Trump administration is doing to the left, and the Trump administration is doing it to the left because the Biden administration did it to the right, and it'll be a tick-tock, back and forth pendulum swing. And the best way to cut it out is to gut the power of the government to be able to do it. So the left can't do it to us and we can't do it to them. But I would note there are lots of proposals by conservatives in Congress to rein in the power of the federal government, and the left won't go along with them. It wouldn't be surprised if I saw Thomas Massie, Chip Roy, or someone drop legislation to curtail the FCC's powers or maybe even get rid of it altogether. And you're not going to see the left support it. They'll block the legislation because they actually want the power. They just don't want it used against them. And that's why it's so intellectually dishonest of them to be complaining right now. They were fine with Gina Carano. They were fine with Roseanne Barr. They were fine targeting Fox News. They're fine targeting conservatives. They were fine going after people they thought were spreading COVID disinformation. They were fine going after the New York Post for the Hunter Biden story. They were fine with all of these things. You made the bed. Now you got to sleep in this bed. If you're upset about Jimmy Kimmel being suspended by ABC, you should be working to defang the FCC. You should be planning legislation to take away the power of the FCC to do stuff like that. I won't hold my breath for you to do it because I firmly believe people on the left are fine with that power. They're fine using the FCC to advance their agenda, just not against them. It's not supposed to happen that way. But here's the problem. There are too many people on the right who've decided they're not playing by the rules they want to play by. They've got to give the left a dose of their own medicine and play by the left's rules. So either people on the left, you stop doing it and work to stop the government from having the power, or get used to taking your own medicine. Greetings. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. I think it's worth doing an audit. Let's do an audit from Mary Catherine Ham on Twitter. It's been a week, she writes, since Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And let's see where we are. A progressive pretended to be the shooter so that the shooter could escape, and the pretend shooter had child porn on his phone. A progressive has been charged with assault in Texas for attacking people mourning Charlie Kirk. In Arizona, a progressive's been charged with vandalism for destroying a memorial for Charlie Kirk and attacking Kirk mourners. And 2 would-be bombers attempted to blow up a Fox television truck in Utah. We got a lot of violence after Charlie Kirk's assassination, and every single person arrested has come from the left. Every single one of them has come from the left. It reminds me back in 2010 when you had all those town halls over Obamacare, or August of 2009, all the town halls about Obamacare and the media. I was on Fox, or on CNN rather, at the time, and they were talking about all the violence from the right at these town halls, and it turns out that there were 18 arrests, and 17 of the arrests were progressives, and of the 17, most of them were union organizers who were harassing conservatives who showed up to challenge Democrats about Obamacare, and yet the media said it was right-wing violence. There were 18 arrests. 17 of the 18 were on the left. Here now, they're talking about the right's violence after Charlie Kirk, and yet the people who are being arrested are on the left, including the guy who pretended to be the shooter to help the shooter get away. So on network news, on cable news, the pages of newspapers, you're hearing about this growing violence on the right after Charlie Kirk, and yet we can actually do an audit of all the arrests, and none of them are people on the right. They're people on the left. It's just the National Press Corps trying to vilify the right. Right now, you should know, Jimmy Kimmel, who said the people on the right are trying to pretend this kid who shot Charlie Kirk wasn't one of their own, and the members of the media are saying he didn't say the guy was MAGA. Yes, I know basic sentence structure. That's exactly what he was saying, and yet the left is now gaslighting us on that. And you really want me to be upset about the Kimmel situation? You people can't even be honest on the left. I consider myself a reasonable person who doesn't want the government in my life. You people just don't want the government in your life. You want them in my life, and now you're mad they're in your life. That's your problem. Disarm and neutralize the government, but you don't want to do that. You want that power to use against your enemies. Old Glory Bank was actually started because of the power the left was using to target conservatives, pressuring banks to turn off accounts. Melania Trump and her son Barron both impacted by debanking trends. And conservatives got together and they started Old Glory Bank. OldGloryBank.com/Eric is where you can go if you want an account. OldGloryBank.com/Eric. You can get a checking account. You can get a savings account. You can get no-fee checking. You can get interest-bearing accounts. You can get mortgages. You can get car loans. You can get CDs. You can get all sorts of great banking products from Old Glory Bank because they're a fully functioning bank headquartered in Oklahoma. You can use them as an online bank, but they figured out even as an online bank how to deposit cash, and it just works. I've used it. OldGloryBank.com/Eric. Again, I've got a no-fee checking and a no-fee savings account. They also have great business options as well. They can do business loans. They're very collaborative with businesses that use them. Go to OldGloryBank.com/Eric today. OldGloryBank.com/Eric. Start a relationship with Old Glory Bank. I've enjoyed using them as my bank. OldGloryBank.com/Eric. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. Check out Old Glory Bank, and if you're a veteran, ask them about some great deals for veterans at OldGloryBank.com/Eric.